When you collaborate with the devil, there is a price to pay, and for these ruthless cartel members, the cost of their transgressions became a sinister symphony. Join us as we witness cartel members reacting to their life sentences and a fate befitting their crimes. The individual you just saw is a man responsible for the deaths of more than 1,000 people, crying as he realizes that he will spend the rest of his life behind bars in the United States. There is no drug lord more suitable to start this list than the Mexican version of Pablo Escobar, known as El Chapo. His real name is Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera. He was not only a drug kingpin, but also the leader of the most sophisticated drug cartel in all of Mexico, the Sinaloa cartel. He was born on April 4th, 1957, in extreme poverty. El Chapo suffered abuse from his father during childhood. This man was a rancher by day and a drug dealer by night. Despite the physical abuse that Chapo suffered at the hands of his father to help him sell marijuana on the streets, the real work of selling drugs was done by Chapo himself. His father squandered his earnings on everything except the family, which led Chapo, along with his mother, brother, and some cousins, to decide to grow his own marijuana plantation to support himself. However, for reasons unknown to us, El Chapo was expelled from his father's home, which led him down the dark path of the world of drug trafficking. He joined the Guadalajara cartel, where he was in charge of coordinating narcotic shipments. What stood out about El Chapo was his lack of tolerance for any mistake. If a shipment was delayed or encountered obstacles, he himself executed the hitman responsible by shooting him in the head. This behavior caught the attention of Felix Gallardo, one of the main drug lords in Mexico at the time. After Gallardo's arrest, El Chapo founded the Sinaloa cartel alongside his notorious kingpins in 1987. From then on, El Chapo took control of the streets of Mexico, overseeing the distribution of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamines, fentanyl, cannabis, and MDMA to the United States. He's said to have shipped more drugs to the United States than any other kingpin in history. The surprise is that it achieved this position by carrying out actions that no one had attempted before, such as using underground tunnels to move part of its shipments. As El Chapo grew up, he became increasingly a wanted man in Mexico. He was arrested twice, in 1993 and 2014. However, he managed to evade the authorities on both occasions. In his last attempt to bring him to justice, El Chapo was arrested for the third time in 2016 and extradited to the United States. He is currently serving multiple life sentences in the most secure prison in the United States, ADX Florence. Pedro Espinosa showed an impassive expression, as is typical among members of the D's and Ocho Street gang when receiving his court sentence.
2012, and furthermore, you, the warden of the California State Prison at San Quentin, are hereby commanded to receive Pedro Espinosa and to hold him in your custody pending the decision on this cause on appeal. Upon the judgment herein becoming final, you are commanded to carry into effect the judgment of this court within the walls of the state prison at San Quentin on a date to be hereinafter fixed by this court in a warrant of execution, at which time and place you shall then put to death Pedro Espinosa in the manner prescribed by law. The defendant is also ordered to pay to the State Victim Compensation Board reimbursement in the sum of $7,500. The people have submitted paperwork, and the defense is submitting on that.
The video you just watched features Espinosa, a member of said gang, who murdered Jamil Andre Shaw II, a talented high school athlete, simply for carrying a red backpack. Shaw was a student in Los Angeles with outstanding abilities in football, basketball, baseball, piano, and track. His promising future was cut short by this brutal act. Shaw's parents supported him every step of the way, while his mother, Anire Shah, was serving her second tour of duty in Iraq at the time of the tragedy. The killer, Pedro Espinosa, was born in 1989 and was an illegal immigrant to the United States. His criminal history began in 2007 when he was arrested on gun charges and assault on a police officer. However, the biggest mistake occurred when Espinosa received an early release from prison on March 1, 2008, even though authorities knew of his irregular immigration status. The situation takes a surprising turn. At 8:40 p.m. on March 2, 2008, two Hispanic men got out of a white car and confronted Shaw, asking him which gang he belonged to. One of them was Pedro Espinosa. As young Shaw walked from the Beverly Center, just 3 blocks from his home, he was confronted by Espinosa and his gang partner. Shaw was asked what gang he belonged to upon seeing him wearing a Spider-Man backpack, mistakenly assuming he was a member of a rival gang, the Bloods, associated with the color red. Shaw, stunned by the confrontation, was unable to speak and was shot dead on the spot. Shaw's father heard the gunshot from his home and called his son to warn him about the area, not knowing that his son was the victim. When he received no response, he ran to him and remained with his son until the arrival of medical personnel. Shaw was taken to a hospital where he was pronounced dead at 9:55 p.m. As for Espinosa, this was his first day out of prison, so it wasn't long before he was recaptured and charged with first-degree murder. After 4 years of legal proceedings, Espinosa was sentenced to death on May 23, 2002. From the deepest shadows to the growth of retribution, these cartel and gang members experienced a dance with destiny like no other. As their stories became intertwined with poetic justice, it is curious how they hardly experienced the same pain they inflicted on many innocent civilians. Marciano Vasquez, aged 70 to 80, is a very small number compared to the actual number of people Vasquez executed during his service to the cartel. In March, Vasquez and a group of hitmen kidnapped 3 people in a remote Mexican town and ordered the deaths of at least half of those kidnapped. And what about the 2003 incident in which he set a 6-year-old girl on fire and forced her parents to watch her burn to death? Then he burned his father, practically exterminating his entire family in a single day. Vasquez was a regional leader of the Zetas. If you have heard of the Zetas, you know that they are one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in Mexico and are capable of committing incomprehensible acts. I'm talking about decapitating his victims, practicing cannibalism, eviscerating parts of their bodies, and feeding his victims wild animals. The current leader of the Zetas is called the Executioner, a nickname that was fairly attributed to him and that should give some idea of the brutality of these individuals. Going back to Vasquez, he was a man who had the courage to do anything he was ordered. He was also the one who gave orders to the hitmen. In addition, he was involved in the organization's shady dealings, allegedly working hand in hand with prominent Mexican politicians. Humberto Morera and his brother Ruben Morera. Later, Vasquez coordinated the substance trafficking routes used by the organization in Coahuila, bribing virtually everyone to ensure that Zeta shipments passed through without problem. But his story does not end there. From drug trafficking and the illicit marketing of weapons to the prohibited sale of pornographic material and the exploitation of human beings, Vasquez was involved in everything. Between 2009 and mid-2000, Vasquez brutally carried out the murder of 30 different people in cold blood. However, he was arrested on July 15, 2005, and sentenced to 7 life sentences on numerous charges. He was not allowed phones in the courtroom during his sentencing, and through footage taken after his conviction, he was seen with his head bowed, lamenting the fact that he would be locked up behind bars for the rest of his life. Caius Vioivis, who was not exactly a member of a cartel, but of a motorcycle club known as Hell's Angels. The Angels were established on March 17, 1948 in Fontana, California, when several small motorcycle clubs in the United States decided to merge. Although they may seem harmless on the outside, these individuals have been linked to various federal crimes, from drug trafficking to prostitution operations. In May 2019, a court in Utrecht, the Netherlands, issued a ruling that completely banned the Hells Angels from their country. Even in Germany, certain chapters of the club have been banned, with a judge declaring that they pose a danger to public order and the rule of law. Club members still maintain that they are not involved in organized criminal activity and are simply motorcycle enthusiasts who have banded together to ride together. Well, we can't confirm the veracity of that, but let's consider Caius's case as a case study. Caius was born and raised in Pitten, Pennsylvania, where he lived with his adoptive parents. He was also a troubled young man and was once arrested by the police for possessing a double-bladed assault knife, which earned him a year of probation. This changed nothing about young Caius. In fact, it only got worse. Over the next few years, he was shuttled between 3 different hospitals for substance abuse, alcohol, heroin, and mushrooms. He even assaulted a member of staff on one occasion. But things get even worse. Caius altered his physical appearance, placing horn-like implants on his forehead, green bones tattooed on his fingers, and the number 666 written between the implants. He called himself a vampire and Satanist. Oh, by the way, his real name is not Caius. In reality, he is Roy Kinski Jr. During his body transformation, he legally changed his name to Caius, referring to the vampire character from the Twilight series, and Vioivis, a Roman god who, according to myths, escaped from hell. It was evident that this individual was losing his mind. Nothing was working for him. The turning point of his crimes came in August 1999, when he and his 17-year-old girlfriend at the time took a knife and cut the back of another girl, only 16 years old. They licked the blood off that knife, and the cut wound resulted in 32 stitches for the injured girl. The legal case that earned him his life sentence was won in 2014, which alleged his involvement in the murder of 3 men: David Glasser, Edward Farman, and Robert Chadwell. He was charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, witness intimidation, and his lawyer tried to paint him as an innocent man. However, the judge and jury did not believe it. Therefore, he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment, and this was his reaction. Gallardo was one of the few men who started the narcotics trade in Mexico. Born on January 8, 1946, Angel Felix Gallardo grew up in Bella Vista, Culiacan, and unlike other drug traffickers, he did not experience absolute poverty. He attended high school and then college. He joined the Mexican Federal Judicial Police Agency and later became the personal bodyguard of then-governor of Sinaloa, Leopoldo Sanchez, where he established connections with high-profile politicians to start a drug trafficking organization. He founded the Guadalajara cartel in the 1970s and collaborated closely with some Colombian cartels to obtain their narcotics shipments. At its peak, The Guadalajara cartel was generating $5 billion annually. However, their problems and eventual downfall came with the appearance of a man named Enrique "Kiki" Camarena, a DEA agent who began investigating the cartel's affairs in the 1980s. After approaching some members of the organization, he obtained information about the cartel's marijuana plantation and additional details about the involvement of certain low-level politicians in the drug trade and shipments to the United States. Camarena subsequently informed the Mexican federal government of his discoveries, which led to the raid on the Gallardo plantation. This evidently infuriated Gallardo, and on February 7, 1985, he ordered the kidnapping of Camarena and his helicopter pilot as they were about to leave the consulate general in Guadalajara. Both were taken to a secluded place where they suffered non-stop torture for 30 hours. Enduring such a level of torment can be lethal, and indeed it was. After 48 hours in the hands of Gallardo and his men, Mr. Camarena and his innocent pilot were murdered, and their bodies were abandoned on the side of the road. However, they were later found by Mexican authorities, causing outrage in the United States. With the government of this nation demanding that the Mexican government arrest everyone involved, a slight inconvenience arose, since Gallardo had the government on his list of employees. There was no way they would hand him over, but due to intense pressure, the Mexican government was forced to hand him over. He was arrested at his residence in Guadalajara while still wearing his bathrobe. He put up no resistance, and the use of weapons was not required, which seemed quite unusual. When he arrived at the station, his reaction was unflappable, displaying a perfect mix of guilt and disinterest. You can see it for yourselves. Despite being sentenced to 40 years in prison, he was granted house arrest in September of 2022. Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez shows an imperturbable reaction during his extradition to the United States. When you think of the greatest drug traffickers of all time, a few names come to mind. But few consider Jorge Eduardo Costilla Sanchez possibly more ruthless than some of the greatest drug traffickers you can imagine. Born on August 1, 1971 in the state of Tamaulipas, Mexico, Costilla began his career as a municipal worker before obtaining information about the drug trade through some friends. In the late 1990s, he befriended then Gulf Cartel leader Ociel Cardenas, who indoctrinated him into the cartel and elevated him to high rank due to his enthusiasm for violence and conducting the operations of the drug business. Cartel drug trafficking. Costilla and Cardenas met two DEA spies who entered their territory to monitor their cartel's operations. However, these spies reminded them of the consequences of killing an American citizen and a federal agent. They thought about it and chose to allow these men to live. However, they still did not face the consequences, since on March 14, 2023, Cardenas was arrested during a confrontation with the Mexican armed forces. Cartel power was then transferred to Costilla, who decided to partner with Cardenas' brother, Antonio Guillen, along with some other drug traffickers. These individuals turned the Gulf Cartel into a scene of civil war, with their constant struggle for power and disagreement. It was during that time that the Zetas broke away from the cartel and began a revolt against their former leaders, marking one of the bloodiest wars in Mexican history. However, fate finally caught up with Costilla when he was arrested on September 2, 2002, in a small neighborhood in Tampico. It seemed as if he knew his time had come because he didn't resist or fight. During his detention and prior to his arrest, not many people knew his identity or even his appearance. There were only 2 photographs of him. However, in 2005, he was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in prison, a sentence that evidently made him experience regret. That's all for today. Don't forget to subscribe if you are a true fan of narco stories. See you next time.